in their rusted orbital colonies. The void was a suffocating absence, a reminder of the Earth they had ruined and the new worlds they were barely allowed to touch. But to the Luminari, the masters of the galactic core, the silence was a song of energy, a lattice of power and light that they alone controlled. The peace between these two civilizations was a thin sheet of glass, transparent and ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. Treaties were signed with ink that never seemed to dry, and diplomats smiled with teeth that looked too much like knives. In the heart of the Luminari capital, within a spire that pierced the upper atmosphere like a needle of diamond, Princess Arya sat in the center of her private chambers. The room was vast, designed for eyes that could appreciate the sweeping panoramic views of the nebula swirling outside, but Arya did not see the nebula. She did not see the golden walls or the intricate tapestries woven from fiber optics. She saw nothing but the dark. Yet, she was not blind in the way the humans understood the word. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her bare feet pressing against the smooth, warm surface of the crystalline tiles. Through the soles of her feet, she felt the hum of the building's power core, a deep, rhythmic thrum that pulsed like a second heart. She lifted a hand, her fingers splayed, and felt the air currents swirling around her, carrying the distinct metallic taste of the ventilation systems. But it was the energy she saw most clearly. To Arya, the world was a canvas of emotional radiation. The two guards standing outside her heavy blast doors were not men in armor. They were pillars of dull, gray boredom, spiked occasionally with the sharp yellow static of alertness when a supervisor walked by. The cleaning drone skittering in the corner was a small, frantic buzz of blue efficiency. She stood up, her movements fluid and practiced. She did not need eyes to navigate. She could feel the density of the furniture, the displacement of the air where the heavy marble table sat. She walked to the window, placing a hand on the transparent alloy, beyond the glass. The city below was a roaring ocean of life. She could feel the collective anxiety of millions of souls, a low-frequency static that made her skin prickle. The Luminari were a proud people, radiant and tall, but lately their pride tasted sour, tainted by the fear of the encroaching human skirmishes on the frontier. The door chimes did not ring, they vibrated through the floor. Arya stiffened. The energy signature approaching her room was not the gray of a guard or the blue of a drone. It was a cold, sucking void, a black hole of ambition and suppressed rage that she had learned to fear more than death. "Commander Valor, her husband, enter," she said, her voice soft but steady. The doors slid open with a hiss. Valor stepped in. Arya did not turn to face him. She did not need to see his face to know he was wearing his dress uniform. The stiffness of his movements and the sharp, metallic resonance of his metals gave him away. He brought a chill into the room, a drop in the emotional temperature that made Arya wrap her arms around herself. "You are not dressed," Valor said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of warmth. It sounded like stones grinding together underwater. "I am wearing my meditation robes," Arya replied, turning slowly to face the void where he stood. "I was not informed we had a function to attend." "There is no function," Valor said, walking past her to the table. He picked up a delicate glass sculpture, turning it in his hands. Arya felt the object's vibrations dampen as his cold grip suffocated it. "We are discussing the tactical realignment of the 7th sector. The human scavengers are probing our defenses near the nebula. I require your signature on the authorization for increased conscription." Arya frowned. "Conscription? But the treaty limits our military buildup." If you draft more soldiers from the outer moons, the human coalition will see it as an act of aggression. Valor laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt like a slap. The humans see everything as aggression. They are a desperate, dying breed clawing at our walls. We must show strength. Sign the datapad. He held out a device. Arya could feel the hum of its circuitry. She hesitated. She was the princess of the blood, the carrier of the ancient gene sequence that allowed her people to manipulate the resonant frequencies of their technology. Yet she was nothing more than a stamp for Valor's decrees. He had married her not for love, nor even for her beauty, but to contain her, to keep the blind anomaly with the dangerous gifts under his thumb. "I can feel your deception, Valor," she whispered. "It tastes like ash in the air. You do not just want defense, you want provocation." Valor stepped closer. The void of his presence expanded, pressing against her mind, suffocating her senses. He smelled of ozone and expensive synthetic musk. "You feel what your broken mind constructs. Arya, do not mistake your hallucinations for insight. Sign." Before she could answer, a servant entered the room, a young girl, her energy signature a fluttering bird of nervousness. She carried a tray of spiced wine. The girl was terrified, her fear radiated off her in waves of sickly green. "My lord," the girl stammered, "your refreshment." Valor turned, annoyed by the interruption. He reached for a goblet, but his movement was too sharp, too aggressive. The girl flinched, and the goblet tipped, spilling purple liquid onto the pristine white cuff of Valor's uniform. The room froze. Arya felt the servant's terror spike into a jagged red scream of panic. She could feel the girl's heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped moth. "I am sorry," the girl gasped, dropping to her knees. "I am so sorry, Commander." Valor looked at his cuff, then down at the girl. He did not shout. He did not strike her. His emotional output remained terrifyingly flat. A frozen lake. "Incompetence is a disease," Valor stated calmly. He raised his left hand. A small device on his wrist hummed, a neural agitator used for disciplining unruly soldiers. "Valor." "No!" Arya cried out, stepping forward. "It was an accident." Valor ignored her. He activated the device. The servant did not scream with her voice, her throat locked up. But Arya felt the scream. It hit her psychic senses like a physical blow, a blast of pure, white-hot agony that tore through the room. Arya gasped, clutching her head, buckling to her knees as the girl's pain flooded her own nervous system. It felt like spikes of ice were being driven into her temples. The girl convulsed on the floor, her nervous system overwhelmed by the induced phantom pain. It lasted only 5 seconds, but to Arya, it felt like an hour. Valor deactivated the device. The girl collapsed, sobbing silently, her energy field shattered and dim. "Clean that up," Valor said to the air, stepping over the girl, "and get out." He turned back to Arya, who was trembling on the floor, breathing hard. He looked down at her with mild curiosity. "You always were too sensitive," he said, wiping the wine from his cuff with a handkerchief. "It makes you weak. A ruler must be immune to the suffering of lessers." "It makes you a monster," Arya whispered, her voice shaking. Valor knelt, grabbing her chin and forcing her face up. His touch was cold, clinical. "Monsters survive. Arya, victims do not. We leave for the orbital station at 0600 hours. Pack your ceremonial chains. We have a diplomatic transfer to oversee." He dropped her chin and walked out. The doors hissed shut, leaving Arya alone with the sobbing servant and the lingering metallic taste of cruelty in the air. Hours later, the room was silent again, but the air felt heavy. Arya sat by the window, clutching a small, battered data slate against her chest. It was forbidden technology, a relic from a human trader she had met once as a child, before the walls had closed in. The door creaked open. It was not Valor this time. It was a soft, warm orange glow. Lyra, her personal maid and the only person in the palace who did not look at Arya as a broken doll. "Is he gone?" Lyra whispered, slipping inside. "He is gone," Arya replied, her voice hollow. "Did the girl recover?" "She is in the medical bay. She will be fine physically, but her spirit—" Lyra trailed off. She sat beside Arya, taking the princess's cold hand. "You should not have interfered, Highness. He enjoys it when you fight back. It gives him an excuse to demonstrate his power, and I cannot help it," Arya said. "I feel it, Lyra. When he hurts them, I feel it in my own marrow. It is as if we are all connected by invisible threads, and he is the one holding the scissors." Lyra glanced at the data slate in Arya's hand. "You are listening to the human music again?" Arya nodded. She pressed a button, and a tinny, distorted melody filled the air. It was a simple acoustic guitar track, a recording of a human singing about a river on a planet called Earth. The voice was rough, imperfect, cracking on the high notes. It was flawed. It was beautiful. "Why do you torture yourself with their art?" Lyra asked gently. "Because it feels honest," Arya said. "Their music is full of pain, yes, but it is their pain. They own it, they share it. In this palace, pain is a weapon. Out there, among the humans, it seems like a bridge." She turned her face toward Lyra, her unseeing eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Is it true, Lyra, what the books say, that humans help each other without expecting payment? That they bond not for political gain, but because of affection?" Lyra sighed, stroking Arya's hair. "I have heard stories, but humans are also brutal. Highness, they destroyed their own world. Do not romanticize them." "I do not romanticize them," Arya said firmly. "I just envy their freedom to be messy, to be broken and still be loved." A chime on the wall interrupted them. It was the priority communications alert. Arya stiffened. It was coming from Valor's study, the room adjacent to hers. The soundproofing was absolute for normal ears, but Valor often forgot that sound was merely vibration, and vibration traveled through the solid crystalline structure of the tower. If she pressed her ear to the wall, she would hear nothing. But if she pressed her fingertips to the separation panel and extended her senses, Arya moved to the wall. "Highness." "No," Lyra hissed. "If he catches you—" "Hush," Arya commanded softly. She placed her palms against the cold surface. She closed her eyes and reached out. The vibrations of Valor's voice bloomed in her mind as distinct patterns. Timeline is accelerated. Valor's voice was a jagged black line. The buyers are impatient. A second voice, distorted, artificial, a hologram. It felt oily, slippery, like sludge moving through a pipe. A syndicate representative. "The asset is ready," Valor said. She suspects nothing of the true nature of the transfer. She believes it is a guardianship exchange. "And the blame?" the oily voice asked. "Will fall squarely on the humans," Valor replied. "When the asset is lost in their territory, the outrage will be sufficient to bypass the Senate. We will have our war, and I will have my debts cleared." Arya pulled her hands back as if the wall had burned her. She stumbled, catching herself on Lyra's shoulder. "What is it?" Lyra asked, alarmed. "What did you hear?" "Transfer of ownership," Arya whispered, horror dawning on her. "He is not negotiating a treaty. He is selling me." "Selling you? That is impossible. You are the princess of the Luminari." "I am an asset," Arya cried, her voice cracking. I am a blind woman with a genetic anomaly that makes me a liability to the throne, but a prize for whoever wants to use me. He is going to sell me and frame the humans for my disappearance to start a war. She paced the room, her bare feet slapping against the tiles. The energy in the room swirled violently, matching her panic. I have to run. I have to get out. And go where? Lyra grabbed her shoulders. You are blind, Arya. You have never been outside the palace walls without an escort. You have no credits, no allies. I have to try. You cannot, Lyra said firmly, pulling her into a hug. Listen to me. If you run now, he will hunt you down and kill you in the corridors. You must go to the station. You must play the part. A public event is the only place he cannot simply murder you. Perhaps there will be an opening. A chance. Arya slumped against her maid, the weight of her destiny crushing her. She felt the truth in Lyra's words. The palace was a cage, but the open galaxy was a void she did not know how to navigate. Very well, Arya whispered. I will go. I will walk into his trap. But I will not walk with my eyes closed. Not anymore. Light years away, the air did not smell of ozone and perfume. It smelled of recycled oxygen, burnt engine grease, and desperation. Station 7, known colloquially as the Rusty Bucket, was a massive rotating hunk of metal orbiting a dead moon in the neutral zone. It was a haven for smugglers, bounty hunters, and the refuse of the galaxy. Jace Rowan sat in a booth at the back of a dimly lit bar called the Gravity Well. He stared into a glass of amber liquid that cost more than his boots. He looked like a man who had been running for a long time. Scruffy jawline, dark hair that hadn't seen a comb in days, and a leather flight jacket that was peeling at the elbows. He swirled the drink, watching the vortex. You are late, Jace said, not looking up. The man who slid into the booth opposite him was a shark in a human suit. Vorian was a loan shark who dealt in credits and kneecaps. He wore a silk suit that looked ridiculous in the grime of the bar, but the two massive cybernetic bodyguards standing behind him made sure no one laughed. I am never late. Mr. Rowan, Vorian said, his voice smooth and dangerous. You are simply early, which is good. It shows you are eager to pay me my money. Jace took a sip of the drink. It burned on the way down. I have 5,000, Vorian tutted, shaking his head. The debt is 20,000. Jace, plus interest, which brings us to 25,000. 5,000 is an insult. I had a bad run, Jace said, his grip tightening on the glass. The shipment of hyperfuel got confiscated by a Luminari patrol. I barely made it out with my ship. That sounds like a you problem, Vorian said. My problem is that my credits are not in my account. And when I have problems, people usually start losing fingers. Or family members. How is your sister? Mira, is she still in the lung tank on Colony 4? Jace slammed the glass down. The sound echoed through the bar. You leave her out of this. She is expensive to keep alive, Vorian mused. Life support systems, medication. If you cannot pay me, perhaps I should stop paying the hospital. It would be a mercy, really. Jace's hand went to the blaster holstered under the table. He knew he couldn't take out Vorian and the two meat droids behind him. He would be dead before he cleared the holster. But the rage in his chest was a living thing, hot and suffocating. I need more time, Jace grated out. Time is money, Vorian said. And you are out of both. However, Vorian leaned forward, steepling his fingers. There is an opportunity. A job. It pays well. Enough to clear your debt and perhaps buy your sister a new pair of lungs. Jace hesitated. Vorian's opportunities usually involved assassinations or suicide runs. What is the job? There is an event happening on this station tonight. A high-level auction. Very exclusive, very illegal. I'm a pilot, not a fence, Jace said. They don't need a fence. They need a face. Vorian slid a small data chip across the table. One of my associates intended to bid, but he met with an unfortunate accident this morning. He has an invitation. You will take his place. Jace looked at the chip. You want me to impersonate a bidder? I don't have the credits to buy a drink, let alone whatever they are selling. You are not there to buy, Vorian explained. You are there to create a distraction. While you are bidding and making a scene, my team will be accessing the secure vault in the back. Once the alarm trips, you run, you get to your ship, and you fly my team off the station. So I'm the bait, Jace said flatly. You are the distraction, Vorian corrected. Survive, and the debt is wiped. Refuse, and I make a call to Colony 4. Jace looked at the shark, then at the chip. He thought of Mira, floating in the biogel, her chest rising and falling only because a machine told it to. He thought of the war he had fought in, the medals he had pawned, and the hollow feeling of being a hero with nothing to show for it. Fine, Jace said, snatching the chip. I'm in. Excellent, Vorian smiled, revealing teeth that were too white. Wear something nice. Jace, it's a formal affair. The docking bay was a cavern of steel and steam. Jace walked toward his ship, the Wayfarer, a modified light freighter that looked like a brick with engines. It was ugly, scarred, and the fastest piece of junk in the sector. A mechanic was welding a panel on the landing gear. He lifted his visor as Jace approached. It was Harl, an old man with oil permanently etched into his skin. You look like you are walking to your execution, Harl grunted. Feels like it, Jace muttered, checking the seals on the airlock. I took a job from Vorian. Harl spat on the deck. You have a death wish. Boy, what is the gig? Some fancy auction. Upper deck stuff. Luminari royalty involved. Apparently. Royalty? Harl laughed, a rasping sound. Listen to me. Jace, don't get your heart tangled with aliens or nobles. Both will sell you faster than air, especially the Luminari. They look like angels, but they have souls made of ice. I'm not planning on making friends, Jace said, patting the hull of his ship. Just paying a debt. He climbed the ramp, pausing at the top to look back at the station. The upper levels were gleaming spires of wealth, rotating above the filth of the lower docks. Somewhere up there, the fate of the galaxy was being bought and sold. Jace didn't care about the galaxy. He just wanted to survive the night. The transport ship that carried Princess Arya was a sleek, silver teardrop. It docked silently at the private VIP hangar of the orbital station. Inside the cabin, the air was cold. Arya stood in the center of the room, her wrists bound in elegant, glowing bands of energy. They were not heavy, but they hummed with a suppression field that dampened her senses, turning the vibrant world of energy into a dull, gray blur. It was like trying to see through thick fog. Valor stood by the door, checking his reflection in the dark glass. Remember your role, he said without turning. You are a diplomat. You are silent unless spoken to. I am a prisoner, Arya said quietly. You are a wife, Valor corrected. In our culture, the distinction is often academic. The ramp lowered, a rush of station air flooded in, even through the dampening field. Arya could taste it. It tasted of greed. It tasted of smoke and cheap perfume and electricity. The sheer volume of emotions hitting her from the station was staggering, a chaotic storm of lust, fear, anger, and avarice. She swayed, dizzy. "Move," Valor commanded. Two guards took her arms, guiding her down the ramp. She walked barefoot, the cold metal of the hangar deck biting into her skin. She could feel the gaze of the people waiting below. Not eyes, but intentions. Sharp, predatory intentions. She raised her chin. She was blind. She was bound. She was being led to a slaughter she could not see. But as she stepped into the noise and the chaos of the station, she made a silent vow. "If I am to be sold," she thought, the resolve hardening in her chest like a diamond, "I will make sure the buyer pays a price they cannot afford." Somewhere in the distance, amidst the swirling chaos of the station's energy, she felt a tiny, flickering spark. It wasn't the jagged red of violence or the cold black of greed. It was faint, tired, and blue. A spark of stubborn decency in a sea of darkness. She did not know what it was, but for the first time in years, she felt something that frightened her more than Valor. She felt hope. The guards pulled her forward, and the darkness swallowed her whole. The obsidian rotunda was not merely a room. It was a cavern carved from the belly of the station, a hollowed-out sphere lined with acoustic dampeners and light-absorbing velvet that made the air feel thick and suffocating. To the eyes of the galaxy's elite, it was a masterpiece of exclusivity, a place where the rarest commodities, illegal tech, dead stars, and sentient lives changed hands in the dark. To Princess Aria, it was a sensory nightmare. The moment the transport doors hissed open, the atmosphere hit her like a physical wave. It was not the scent of the room, though it reeked of stale ozone and expensive stimulants. It was the emotional pressure. The rotunda was filled with 50 of the most powerful beings in the sector, and every single one of them radiated a hunger that tasted like copper on her tongue. She stood on a circular platform that hovered a few inches above the floor. Around her, a containment field hummed, a low, buzzing mosquito sound that scratched at her sensitive ears. The field was designed to keep her in, but to Aria, it felt like it was keeping the rest of the universe out, isolating her in a bubble of cold, sterile silence. "Walk," Valor whispered near her ear. His voice was a flat gray line in the chaos. "Do not stumble. You represent the dignity of the Empire, even as you leave it." Aria took a step, her bare feet meeting the cold metal of the hover disk. The energy bands on her wrists were heavy, pulsing with a suppression algorithm that dimmed her extrasensory perception, turning the blinding lights of the guests' emotions into muddy, terrifying shapes. She could not see their faces, but she could feel them. To her left, a jagged spike of aggression, a warlord. Perhaps, to her right, a slimy, coiling sensation of greed that felt like oil slicking over water. And everywhere, the heavy, suffocating weight of objectification. They did not see a woman. They did not even see a princess. They saw a thing, a key to power, a biological curiosity. She kept her head high, staring sightlessly into the darkness, her spine rigid. If she was to be sold like cattle, she would stand like a queen. Jace Rowan adjusted the collar of his borrowed suit and tried not to itch. The fabric was synthetic silk, too tight across the shoulders, and the collar dug into his neck. He felt like a fraud. He felt like a target. He stood at the back of the rotunda, leaning against a pillar of black marble, trying to blend into the shadows. Vorian's invitation chip had gotten him past the security drones, but it could not buy him the arrogance needed to belong here. The room was filled with creatures that made his skin crawl. To his right sat a broker from the Trade Federation, a man whose skin had been replaced by gold plating. To his left, a massive insectoid creature from the hive worlds chittered quietly to a translator droid. The air smelled of money and blood. Jace checked his wrist comp. The extraction team was on standby. All he had to do was wait for the bidding to start, make a loud, obnoxious bid that he couldn't pay, and trigger the security alert. A simple distraction, a smash and grab. Then the lights dimmed, a spotlight, harsh and white, speared down from the ceiling, illuminating the center of the room. The platform drifted into view. Jace straightened, his breath catching in his throat. He had expected a crate. He had expected a prototype weapon, a canister of unstable isotopes, maybe a stolen data core. He had not expected a woman. She stood in the center of the beam, bathed in light that made her pale skin glow like alabaster. She was tall, slender, wearing a gown of shifting liquid fabric that seemed to ripple with its own gravity. Her hair was a cascade of silver, falling to her waist, and her eyes were covered by a strip of translucent silk. Even from this distance, Jace could see the heavy glowing shackles on her wrists. He felt a sudden, sharp twist in his gut. It was a feeling he hadn't felt since the war, when he'd found a refugee ship drifting dead in the void. It was the sickness of witnessing something fundamentally wrong. "That is Illuminari," a voice whispered beside him. A human voice. Jace glanced over to see an older man with a scar running through his lip. A royal luminari. "Do you see the crest on her shackles? That is the sigil of the High House." "Why is she here?" Jace muttered, his voice tight. The man chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Everything has a price. Boy, even gods." Jace looked back at the woman. She looked terrified. Not the screaming, thrashing terror of a soldier, but the quiet, frozen terror of a statue. He could see her hands trembling slightly against the folds of her dress. This wasn't a job. This was a slave auction. Valor stepped into the spotlight, standing just outside the containment field. He raised his hands, his smile practiced and predatory. "Distinguished guests," he began, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "I present to you a unique opportunity, a convergence of diplomacy and guardianship." He gestured to Arya. "This is the Lady Arya. By the complex laws of the Luminari succession, she has become a diplomatic asset without a portfolio. Her lineage is impeccable. Her genetic code is flawless. However, due to unfortunate political realignments within the Empire, she requires a new protectorate, a new home." Arya flinched. The word home sounded like a curse in his mouth. "This transfer of guardianship," Valor continued, smoothly stepping around the truth, "comes with full legal authority over her person, her estate, and her biological legacy. The successful bidder will not merely gain a companion. They will gain the key to the Luminari genome." A murmur went through the crowd. Jace saw the insectoid creature lean forward, its mandibles clicking. "We are not selling a person," Valor said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We are creating an alliance." "Liar," Jace thought. "You are selling her to the butchers." The auctioneer, a drone with a polished chrome chassis, floated forward. "The bidding will commence at 10 million credits." 10 million. The gold-plated man shouted immediately. "I can use her DNA to synthesize a new line of rejuvenation serums. Her marrow alone is worth double that." 12 million. A voice from the shadows boomed. "A warlord. She has the sight, does she not? The psychic anomaly. I will strap her to the helm of my flagship. She will serve as a living radar. No ambush will ever catch me." 15 million, shouted a woman with cybernetic eyes. "I simply want to see if Luminari bleed light." Arya staggered on the platform. To Jace. She looked like she had been physically struck. She raised a hand to her temple, her mouth opening in a silent gasp. In her mind, The words were not just sounds. They were physical assaults. The gold man's greed felt like a scalpel slicing into her skin. The warlord's intention felt like a heavy chain crushing her chest. The woman's curiosity felt like 1,000 needles. The containment field trapped these energies, bouncing them back at her, amplifying the psychic noise until she thought her skull would fracture. She swayed, dropping to one knee. Valor glanced at her with annoyance, but he did not help her. He merely gestured for the auction to continue. Jace gripped the railing in front of him. His knuckles were white. The plan was to wait. The plan was to bid late. But the sickness in his gut was rising, turning into a hot, burning anger. He looked around the room. 50 people, 50 of the richest, most powerful beings in the galaxy, and not one of them saw a human being on that stage. They saw parts. They saw profit. 18 million. The insectoid clicked. For breeding rights, the hybrids would be formidable. That was it. The snap. Does anyone here actually see her as a person? The voice was loud. It was angry. And it was Jace's. The room went silent. The bidding stopped. 50 heads turned to look at the back of the room, where the scruffy pilot in the ill-fitting suit was standing, his hands clenched into fists. Valor squinted into the darkness. Who speaks? I speak, Jace said, stepping out of the shadows. He walked down the aisle, his boots echoing on the obsidian floor. I asked a question. You are talking about harvesting her marrow. You are talking about breeding her. Does she not get a say? Or is the great Luminari Empire so bankrupt that you sell your women like livestock? Laughter rippled through the room. It was not nervous laughter. It was mocking. A moralist, the gold man sneered. How quaint. You are out of your depth. Human, Valor said, his voice dripping with disdain. This is a transaction of high state. It is beyond your primitive understanding of morality. Do you have a bid, or are you merely here to provide entertainment? Jace stopped at the edge of the pit, looking up at Valor. He looked at Arya. She was still on her knee, her head turned toward him. She couldn't see him. He knew that. But she was facing him directly. I don't have 18 million credits, Jace said. But I have eyes, and what I see makes me sick. Get him out of here, someone shouted. Kill him, the warlord suggested. The security drones detached from the ceiling, their red eyes locking onto Jace. He tensed, his hand drifting toward the concealed blaster at the small of his back. He had blown the plan. Vorian was going to kill him, the drones were going to kill him, but then... The auctioneer drone spoke. Its voice was a monotone buzz that cut through the tension. Pause. Protocol. 7 Alpha is invoked. Valor whipped around to face the drone. What? No. Protocol 7 Alpha is archaic. It has not been used in centuries. The item, the asset, has reacted. The drone stated. All eyes turned to the platform. Arya had stood up. She was trembling, but she was standing, and she was pointing, not at Valor, not at the crowd. She was pointing directly at Jace. The bond right, the auctioneer intoned. Luminari law dictates that in any transfer of guardianship involving a royal of the blood, the asset must consent to the energetic compatibility of the new guardian. This ensures the stability of the bond, Valor hissed. This is a formality. She is blind. She cannot choose. She perceives, the drone countered. The right is binding. If the princess chooses a bidder, that bidder wins the auction at the current floor price. Valor looked furious. He looked at Jace, then at Arya. He composed himself with a sneer. Very well. Let her choose. She will not choose a penniless human scavenger. She will choose power. She is Luminari. She understands hierarchy. Valor stepped back, crossing his arms. Choose, Arya, and choose wisely. Remember who holds your leash. Arya stood in the silence. The suppression field hummed, but through the noise, she had felt it. When the human had spoken, the room had been a storm of jagged red and sickly green emotions, but his voice had been a ripple of blue. It wasn't a hero's blue, bright and searing, and it was a deep oceanic blue, and it was the color of a bruised twilight. It tasted of exhaustion, yes, and fear, certainly. But beneath that, there was a steady, rhythmic pulse, a warmth. She closed her eyes behind the silk blindfold and extended her senses. She ignored the warlord, whose soul felt like a rusted blade. She ignored the corporate man, who felt like a spreadsheet of calculated cruelty. She ignored Vailor, the void. She reached out for the blue light. It was chaotic. The human was terrified. He was worried about money. He was worried about a sister. He was angry at himself for speaking, but in the center of that chaos there was a refusal to cause harm, a stubborn refusal to be a monster. In this room of kings and killers, he was the only one who felt like safety. Arya took a deep breath. She raised her hand again, her finger steady as it pointed at the man in the cheap suit. The room held its breath. "If I must be won," she said, her voice clear and bell-like in the silence, ringing off the dark walls. "If I must be sold like a thing, then I choose the one whose heart is gentle." She did not lower her hand. "I choose the human." The silence stretched for a heartbeat, and then the room exploded. "Outrage!" the warlord roared, slamming his fist onto his armrest. "Fraud!" the gold man screamed. Vailor looked as if he had been slapped. His face went pale, then a dark, mottled red. He took a step toward the containment field, his hand raising as if to strike the glass. "You ungrateful." The auctioneer's voice boomed. "The choice is made. The bid is accepted at the floor price. 10 million credits. The debt is transferred to the winner." Jace stood frozen. He had just bought a princess. He didn't have 10 million credits. He didn't have 10 credits. He had a debt to a loan shark and a ship held together by duct tape. But as he looked at Arya, standing there alone in the light, pointing at him as if he were her salvation, the fear vanished. It was replaced by a strange, heavy sense of responsibility. He walked forward. The crowd parted for him, not out of respect, but out of shock. He stepped up to the platform. The containment field flickered and died. Vailor stood in his path. The commander was taller than Jace, broader, and radiated enough menace to freeze water. "You will regret this, human," Vailor hissed, his voice low enough that only Jace could hear. "You have purchased a death sentence." "Put it on my tab," Jace said, his voice surprisingly steady. He stepped around Vailor. He walked up to Arya, up close. She was even more beautiful, and even more terrifyingly fragile. She was trembling violently now that the adrenaline was fading. Jace reached out but stopped before he touched her. He remembered the warlord's words. He slowly peeled off his leather gloves, tucking them into his pocket. He wanted her to feel skin, not material. He wanted her to know he wasn't a machine. He reached out and gently, very gently, wrapped his fingers around her wrist, just above the glowing shackle. She flinched, a sharp intake of breath. "I'm not going to hurt you," Jace murmured. Arya tilted her head. She focused on the point of contact. His skin was rough, calloused from years of gripping flight sticks and wrenches. His pulse was racing, thumping against her own. But there was no deception in him, no spike of malice, just a warm, steady pressure. "I know," she whispered back. "I'm Jace," he said. "And we are getting out of here." "I am Arya," she replied. Jace looked at the shackles. "How do I get these off?" You do not— Valor's voice cut in. He had composed himself. He turned to the crowd, spreading his hands in a gesture of magnanimity that made Jace want to punch him. An unexpected turn, Valor announced, forcing a smile. But the Luminari respect the old ways. The rite is satisfied. The guardianship is transferred. He turned to Jace, his eyes cold and dead. The control codes for her restraints will be transferred to your ship. You have 24 hours to settle the payment with the exchange bank. Until then, she is your responsibility. Valor leaned in close, invading Jace's personal space. Take her to your ship, pilot. Enjoy your prize, because you will never leave this sector alive. Jace met his gaze. Watch me? He turned back to Arya. Can you walk? Yes, she said. Then hold on to me. Jace placed her hand on his arm. She gripped his sleeve tightly, her knuckles white, together. They turned and walked away from the platform, away from the spotlight, and into the shadows of the exit. Behind them, the auction continued, the elite quickly losing interest in the drama and returning to their commerce. But Valor remained standing in the light, watching them go. He tapped a small communication link in his ear. Commander? A voice crackled. Let them reach the docking bay, Valor said quietly. Let him think he has won. Then activate the sleeper agents. I want the ship destroyed before it clears the atmosphere. And the princess? If she is with a human, she is contaminated, Valor said, turning his back on the door. Burn it all. The corridor outside the rotunda was cool and quiet. Jace walked quickly, guiding Arya with a gentle pressure on her arm. He could feel her shivering. You are walking too fast, she whispered. Sorry, Jace said, slowing down slightly. I really want to get off this station. You do not have the money, do you? Arya asked. It wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact. Jace laughed, a short, nervous bark. Lady, I don't even have the money for the parking fee. Then why? She asked. Why did you speak? Jace stopped. He looked at her. She was waiting for an answer, her head tilted, listening to his heartbeat. I don't know, Jace admitted. I guess I just hate bullies. Arya smiled. It was a small, fleeting thing, but it transformed her face. That is a dangerous trait. Jace Rowan. Yeah. Jace sighed, starting to walk again. My sister tells me that all the time. Come on. My ship is this way. And if we're lucky, it hasn't been towed yet. They moved through the corridors, two fugitives in a city of wolves. Jace kept one hand near his blaster, his eyes scanning every shadow. Arya kept her hand on his arm, her mind scanning every emotion. She felt fear rolling off him in waves. She felt the crushing weight of the debt he had just taken on. But underneath it all, that blue flame was still burning. It was the only light she had seen in years. And for the first time since she was a child, Arya did not feel alone in the dark. By the time they reached the private docking tubes, the adrenaline was beginning to fade, replaced by a cold, hard reality. Jace keyed in the access code for the hangar bay. The door slid open. The wayfarer sat there, ugly and beautiful. Jace led her up the ramp. As soon as the airlock cycled shut behind them, the noise of the station cut off. The silence of the ship was heavy. Jace exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. He leaned back against the bulkhead, sliding down until he was sitting on the deck floor. He put his head in his hands. What have I done? He muttered. Arya stood in the center of the airlock. She could feel the ship. It felt old. It felt tired. But it felt honest. You saved me, she said softly. Jace looked up at her. He looked at the royal chains on her wrists. He looked at the silk dress that cost more than his life. "I didn't save you, princess," he said bleakly. "I just stole you. And now, every bounty hunter in the galaxy is going to be coming for us." Arya knelt down in front of him. She reached out, finding his hand with hers. "Then we should probably start the engines," she said. Jace stared at her. Then slowly, a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, we probably should." He stood up, pulling her with him. "Welcome aboard the Wayfarer, Your Highness. Try not to touch anything sticky." Arya laughed, and as the ship's engines roared to life beneath their feet, she felt the vibrations travel up through her bones, shaking loose the fear, shaking loose the cage. She was still blind. She was still a prisoner of her own biology. But she was moving. And for now, that was enough. Outside the hull, in the shadows of the docking clamps, 3 dark shapes detached from the station walls. They were sleek, silent, and heavily armed. They drifted toward the Wayfarer like sharks smelling blood in the water. Valor's cleanup crew had arrived. The metal bracelet on Jace's wrist felt heavier than it looked. It was a thin band of black chrome, issued by the station's automated registrar as they had exited the obsidian rotunda. It was a controller, a leash handle. As long as he wore it, he held the command codes for the energy restraints binding Arya's wrists. He hated it. It felt like a handcuff on his own soul. They walked briskly through the lower service corridors of the station, away from the glittering eyes of the elite and toward the grimy, oil-stained docks where the Wayfarer was berthed. The air here smelled of ozone and stale noodle broth. "So," Jace said, breaking the silence that had stretched since they left the auction floor. "Just so we are clear. This isn't... I don't own people." Arya walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on his forearm for guidance. She moved with a fluid grace that made the industrial surroundings look even uglier by comparison. "The document in your pocket says otherwise," she replied. Her voice was calm, but Jace could feel the tension in her grip. "Legally, you are my guardian, my master." "Don't use that word," Jace snapped, then softened his tone immediately. "Please. I am just a guy who made a very expensive mistake because he has a problem with authority." Arya turned her head slightly toward him. Her eyes were still covered by the silk blindfold, but she seemed to be studying him. "Your energy is strange. Jace Rowan. Strange good or strange bad?" Jace asked, checking a corner before guiding her around it. "Strange." "Tired," Arya said. Most of the men in that room felt like fire or ice. Sharp, hunger, ambition. You feel like old stone, heavy, worn down, but underneath, there is something soft, like moss growing on a ruin. Jace snorted. "Great. I'm a mossy rock. That's definitely going on my dating profile." Arya let out a small, startled sound that might have been a laugh. It was a lovely sound, like a wind chime in a storm. "You use humor as a shield," she observed. "You are afraid, terrified," Jace corrected. "I owe a loan shark 20,000 credits, and now I owe the Luminari Empire 10 million. If I stop making jokes, I might start screaming and never stop." He stopped at a heavy blast door marked Docking Bay 94. He keyed in the access code, and the door groaned open. The corridor beyond was empty, a private airlock tube leading to his ship. Jace pulled her inside and hit the lock button. As soon as the door sealed, he turned to her. "Okay," he said. "First things first, give me your hands." Arya hesitated, then held out her wrists. The energy bands pulsed with a faint violet light. Jace tapped the black bracelet on his own wrist. A holographic interface sprang up. He scrolled through the options: voltage increase, tracker ping, lockdown. The menu made him sick. He found release and pressed it. The violet light died. The heavy metal cuffs clicked and fell open. Jace caught them before they hit the floor. He tossed them into a recycling bin in the corner with a loud clang. Then he unclasped the control band from his own wrist and threw that in after them. "Better?" he asked. Arya stood perfectly still. She brought her hands to her chest, rubbing her wrists. Her skin was pale where the bands had been. She took a deep breath, her shoulders shuddering. "I feel naked," she whispered. Jace looked away, suddenly awkward. The vulnerability in her voice was too raw. "Yeah, well, freedom takes some getting used to." He watched as she extended her fingers, feeling the air, without the suppression field of the cuffs. Her senses were returning. She turned her head, mapping the small space of the airlock. "You are standing near the door," she said. "Your heart rate has slowed, but your cortisol levels are still high. You are worried about your ship. She's a piece of junk, but she's my piece of junk," Jace said. "Come on. Let's get you aboard before someone realizes I paid with a credit chip that has about 4 credits on it." He led her through the final hatch. The interior of the Wayfarer smelled of coffee and hydraulic fluid. It was cramped, utilitarian, and cluttered with spare parts. "Rook, we have company," Jace called out. A blue light flickered on the console near the cockpit. A disembodied voice filled the cabin, dry, synthesized, and dripping with sarcasm. "Company?" the AI replied. "Or another stray you picked up? My sensors detect a Luminari biosignature. High nobility, female. Did you kidnap a princess, Jace? Because my probability algorithm suggests that ends in disintegration 99% of the time." "I didn't kidnap her," Jace said, guiding Arya to the co-pilot seat. "I won her." "Oh, wonderful," Rook drawled. "We are barely solvent enough to afford fuel, and now we are participating in the slave trade. My ethical subroutines are thrilling with delight. She's a passenger. Rook, be nice." Arya sat down, running her hands over the worn leather of the seat. She smiled. "He cares for you very much," she said to the empty air. Rook paused. "I beg your pardon?" "Jace," Arya said. "His affection for you is bright orange, like a warm fire. He relies on you." Rook was silent for a full 3 seconds. A long time for an AI. "Well," Rook said finally, his voice slightly less acerbic. "At least someone appreciates my genius." "Welcome aboard, Your Highness. Try not to bleed on the upholstery. It is synthetic and stains easily." Jace strapped himself into the pilot's seat. "Strap in, Arya. We are leaving in a hurry." He began flipping switches. The engines coughed, then whined to life. The Wayfarer shuddered as the docking clamps released. "Jace," Rook warned. "Proximity alert. 3 contacts. Fast movers. Hunter-Seeker class drones. They are locking weapons." "I see them," Jace said, his hands flying over the controls. "Hang on." He slammed the throttle forward. The ship lurched, shooting out of the docking tube and into the vacuum of space. The view screen showed the station receding rapidly, but 3 black specks were gaining on them. Red laser fire streaked past the cockpit window. "Shields up," Jace yelled. "Shields at 40%, Rook reported. "They are targeting our engines." Jace banked the ship hard to the left, diving toward a field of debris, the remains of old satellites and wrecked hulls that orbited the station like a garbage belt. "I can't shake them," Jace gritted out. "They're anticipating my moves." "They are not anticipating," Arya said suddenly. Her voice was tight, her head turned toward the rear of the ship. They are tracking the energy signature of the core. They are going to fire a displacement pulse in 3 seconds. To the right. What? Jace asked. Turn right. Now. Jace didn't question her. He yanked the stick to the right. A split second later, a massive concussive blast erupted in the space they had just occupied. If he had stayed on course, their engines would have been dead. How did you know that? Jace shouted, weaving the ship through the skeletal remains of a freighter. I can feel the buildup, Arya said, her hands gripping the armrests. The energy. It gathers before it releases, like a breath before a scream. Another one. Left. High. Jace pulled up and left. Another blast missed them by meters, scorching the hull paint. He grinned. You're a human radar. I am Luminari, she corrected, breathless. Okay. Luminary radar. Keep talking to me. For the next 5 minutes, they danced through the void. Jace flew with the desperate skill of a man who had spent half his life running from trouble, and Arya guided him with the impossible precision of a woman who could see the invisible. Incoming! Arya cried out. It is a physical projectile. No energy buildup. A missile. Rook. Flares, Jace shouted. Flares deployed. Rook confirmed. The missile detonated against the flares, sending a shockwave that slammed into the Wayfarer. The ship spun violently. The artificial gravity flickered and died for a second, then slammed back on. Arya was thrown from her seat. She hadn't tightened her straps enough. She tumbled across the cabin, crashing into a stack of cargo crates. Arya! Jace unbuckled and dove out of his chair. The ship lurched again as another laser hit the shields. Jace scrambled across the tilting floor. He reached her just as a heavy crate of spare parts toppled toward her. He threw himself over her, shielding her body with his. The crate smashed into his shoulder, cracking against the floor plating. Jace grunted in pain but didn't let go. He held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. For a moment, the universe narrowed down to the space between them. They lay tangled on the metal floor, breathing hard. The ship was still shaking. Alarms were blaring, but Jace didn't move. He looked down at her. Her blindfold had slipped slightly, revealing the pale, delicate skin of her cheekbones. Her lips were parted, her chest rising and falling rapidly against his. She could feel him. Not just his body, the hard muscle, the heat of his skin through his shirt, but his essence. His fear had vanished, in this moment, protecting her. His energy was a brilliant, blinding gold. It was pure, protective instinct. He smelled of engine grease and sweat and something distinctly masculine. It was intoxicating. Jace looked at her mouth. He felt a sudden electric pull, a desire so sharp it almost hurt. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to kiss the fear off her face. Then the ship stabilized. Hyperdrive engaged, Rook announced calmly. We are in the clear. Jace blinked, the moment shattering. He pulled back, his face flushing. He realized his leg was between hers, his body pressing her into the floor. Sorry, he stammered, scrambling off her. The crate. I didn't want it to hit you. Arya sat up, adjusting her dress. Her cheeks flushed a faint violet, the Luminari blush. You shielded me, she said quietly. You used your own body. Yeah. Well, Jace said, rubbing his throbbing shoulder. You're the asset, right? Can't have the merchandise getting damaged. He offered her a hand. She took it. As he pulled her up, she didn't let go immediately. You are lying, she said. What? You called me merchandise. But your energy, it was not possessive. It was sacrificial. You were willing to bleed for me. Jace pulled his hand away gently and turned to check the console, refusing to look at her. Look, let's just get out of this sector before I bleed for anyone. Okay? 2 hours later, The Wayfarer was cruising steadily through hyperspace, a tunnel of swirling blue light. The cabin was quiet. Jace sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the stars. Arya sat behind him on the small bunk that served as the crew quarters. "I am sorry," Jace said suddenly. Arya tilted her head. "For what? For buying you? For participating in that circus? I didn't plan on it. I just went there to cause a distraction for a friend. But when I saw you standing there..." He trailed off, running a hand through his messy hair. "I hated it. I hated every second of it. And I hate that I had to use their rules to get you out. You deserve better than being won in a card game or an auction." Arya stood up and walked toward him. She moved confidently now, having mapped the small space of the cabin. She stopped just behind his chair. "You did not buy me, Jace," she said softly. "I signed the papers. Arya, I have the receipt. Papers are ink and lies," she said, "in that room, surrounded by monsters who wanted to consume me. You were the only one who felt like a door. Everyone else was a cage. You were an open door." She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You saved my life. Do not apologize for the method." Jace looked at her hand on his shoulder. It felt warm. "So," he said, trying to lighten the mood. "What now? I assume you want to go home? Although, considering your husband was the one selling you, maybe a family reunion isn't the best idea." "No," Arya said, her face darkening. "I cannot go back. Valor will kill me. Or worse, he will lock me away in the stasis vaults until he needs me again." "We need to find someone who can help," Jace said. "I have a contact, a hacker. She operates out of a jungle moon in the Outer Rim. She might be able to decode the data on your neural implants, maybe figure out why Valor is doing this." "My implants?" Arya touched her temple. "Yeah. Valor said something about you being a diplomatic asset. You're valuable for more than just your title. There's data locked in your head. Arya, we need to find out what it is." Arya nodded slowly. "Then we go to this moon." She paused, frowning slightly. "Jace? Yeah? What is pure kindness?" Jace swiveled his chair around. "What?" "In the auction, I said you won me with pure kindness. I felt it. But humans? My tutors taught me that humans are selfish, that your species is driven by greed and survival." "Why are you different? I'm not," Jace said, looking down at his boots. "I've done bad things. Arya, I fought in the war. I killed Luminari soldiers. I've smuggled. I've stolen. I'm no saint. But you are kind," she insisted. "Why?" Jace shrugged, uncomfortable. I guess I just decided a long time ago that the universe is cruel enough on its own. It doesn't need my help." He looked up at her, his eyes sad. "And maybe I'm just trying to balance the scales. For the things I've done," Arya smiled. "It is working. The Wayfarer was not built for passengers. It was built for cargo." The living space was a single room behind the cockpit, containing a small galley, a hygiene unit, and one narrow bunk. As the ship's cycle shifted to night, dampening the lights, the reality of their arrangement set in. "I can sleep in the chair," Jace offered, grabbing a blanket. "You will damage your spine," Arya said. "The AI says we are entering a turbulence belt. You need to be secured." "Rook is a snitch," Jace muttered. "I am practical," Rook's voice chimed in, "and the princess is correct. The bunk is the only crash-safe zone in the living quarters, unless you wish to sleep in the cargo hold with the spare coolant tanks." "Fine," Jace sighed. "We'll share. But you stay on your side. No royal elbows in my ribs. They lay down on the narrow bunk. It was a tight fit. They had to lie on their sides, facing each other. Jace was acutely aware of every inch of contact, their knees brushing, the warmth of her body radiating through the thin flight suit he had given her to wear. The ship rocked gently as they hit the turbulence. "Arya?" Jace whispered into the dark. "Yes? Are you okay?" "I am exploring," she said. Before he could ask what she meant, he felt her hand on his face. Her fingertips were cool and incredibly soft. She traced the line of his jaw, the rough stubble of his beard. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked. "I cannot see you, Jace," she whispered. "I want to know what you look like." She traced the scar on his chin. "You were hurt here?" "Shaving accident." Jace lied. "Liar. It feels like jagged metal. Shrapnel?" "Yeah." She moved her fingers up to his nose, which was slightly crooked. "And here. Bar fight. I didn't duck fast enough." She traced the orbital bone of his eye, her thumb brushing his eyelashes. He squeezed his eyes shut, his breath hitching. The sensation was overwhelming. It was intimate in a way that terrified him. "You have kind eyes," she murmured. "I can feel the shape of them. They crinkle when you smile, do they not?" "Sometimes," Jace managed to say. Her hand moved to his hair, her fingers threading through the messy locks. She pulled him slightly closer. Their faces were inches apart. He could feel her breath on his lips. It smelled of mint and something sweet, like alien nectar. Jace felt a surge of desire so strong it made his hands shake. He wanted to close the distance. He wanted to kiss her, but he froze. He couldn't. She was vulnerable. She was dependent on him. Arya stopped. Her hand rested on his cheek. "You want to kiss me," she whispered. Her voice was not fearful. It was curious and inviting. I shouldn't," Jace choked out. "Because I am a princess? Because you're relying on me to survive? It's not fair to you." Arya moved closer, pressing her forehead against his. "Jace Rowan," she breathed. "You are a stubborn fool, but you are a good man." She pulled back slightly, her hand dropping to his chest, resting over his heart. "Sleep," she said softly. "We have a long way to go." Jace let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for an hour. "Good night, Arya. Good night, Jace." He lay there in the dark, listening to the hum of the engines and the steady rhythm of her breathing, knowing with absolute certainty that he was in deep, terrible trouble. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to run away. The Wayfarer shuddered violently as it dropped out of hyperspace, the inertial dampeners whining in protest against the sudden deceleration. Through the cockpit viewport, the destination hung in the void like a bruised fruit. It was a moon called Xylos, a chaotic swirl of purple storm clouds and deep, verdant jungles, orbited by a ring of shattered asteroids. "Rough landing ahead," Jace warned, his hands flying across the controls. "The atmosphere is 80% nitrogen and 20% pure turbulence." Arya sat in the co-pilot seat, her hands gripping the armrests until her knuckles were white. She could not see the storm, but she could feel the planet below. It did not feel like the cold, orderly hum of the luminary capital, nor the sharp, jagged electricity of the auction station. Xylos felt like a roar. It was a cacophony of life, death, growth, and decay, all screaming at once. "It is loud," she whispered, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Yeah, the weather sensors are going crazy," Jace muttered. "Hang on." The ship hit the upper atmosphere, and the world tilted. They descended through layers of violent clouds, the hull groaning under the pressure. Rain lashed against the hull, sounding like handfuls of gravel being thrown against a tin roof. Jace fought the stick, guiding the old freighter toward a magnetic beacon pinging from the southern hemisphere. With a final bone-jarring thud, the wayfarer touched down in a clearing surrounded by towering trees that twisted toward the sky like gnarled fingers. Jace killed the engines. The roar of the thrusters died, replaced by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the hull. "We are down." Jace exhaled, slumping back in his seat. "You okay?" Arya nodded slowly. She unbuckled her straps and stood up. "I want to go outside." Jace looked at the monitor. "It's pouring rain." "Arya, and it's mud season." "I need to feel it," she insisted. "The energy here. It is unlike anything I have ever known." Jace sighed, grabbing a heavy poncho from the locker. "Fine, but if you catch a fever, don't blame me." He led her to the cargo ramp and hit the release. The ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics, and the jungle rushed in. The air was thick, hot, and smelled of wet earth and crushing spices. Arya stepped out onto the ramp, and then onto the spongy ground. She was wearing the oversized flight suit Jace had lent her, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. She lifted her face to the sky. The rain fell on her skin, but to her senses it was not cold water. It felt like warm static, millions of tiny electric sparks dancing across her face. "It tickles." She laughed, spinning slowly in a circle. Jace stood at the bottom of the ramp, watching her. To him, it was just a miserable, wet jungle. To her, it was a symphony. "What do you see?" Arya asked, reaching out toward a massive fern that pulsated with a deep, slow rhythm in her mind. Jace looked around. Green. A lot of green. Big trees. Mud. "That plant you are pointing at has leaves the size of a dinner table." "Green," Arya mused. "What does green feel like?" Jace scratched the back of his neck. It feels like life, like growth. It's calming, usually." Arya shook her head. "To me, it is not calm. It is a riot. That tree there." She pointed to a towering giant covered in bioluminescent moss. "It feels like a deep bass drum vibrating in the ground. And the vines wrapped around it feel like high-pitched strings, frantic and hungry." She took a step toward a patch of vibrant flowers. "Be careful," Jace warned, stepping closer. "These feel happy," Arya said, smiling. "They feel bright and sweet, like sugar dissolving on the tongue." Jace looked at the flowers. "Those are carnivorous pitcher plants. Arya, they eat small rodents. They smell sweet to trap things." Arya froze, her hand inches from a gaping maw. She snatched her hand back, her face scrunching up in disgust. "They are liars," she cried. Jace laughed, a genuine sound that startled a flock of birds from the canopy. "Nature is a liar, princess. Pretty things are usually dangerous." "Like me?" she asked, turning her blindfolded face toward him, a playful smirk touching her lips. Jace stopped laughing. He looked at her, wet hair plastered to her neck, standing in the mud, radiating an ethereal beauty that made the jungle look dull. "Especially like you," he said softly. A mechanical whirring sound cut through the moment. From the dense foliage ahead, a section of the jungle floor retracted, revealing a metal staircase leading underground. "About time," Jace muttered. "Come on." "Our ride is here." He took her hand, guiding her down the stairs. The heavy doors sealed above them, shutting out the roar of the rain and the screaming energy of the jungle. The bunker below was a chaotic mess of cables, servers, and half-dismantled droids. It smelled of ozone and stale coffee, a smell Arya was beginning to associate with safety. "Well, if it isn't the galaxy's worst pilot," a voice echoed from the shadows. A woman spun around in a chair at the far end of the room. She was human, mostly. Her left arm was a gleaming chrome prosthetic, and her left eye was replaced by a red cybernetic lens that whirred as it focused. She had shocking pink hair shaved on one side and wore a vest covered in grease stains. "Hello, Nova," Jace said, grinning. "And look at this," Nova said, standing up and walking toward them. "Jace Rowan brought a girl. And not just a girl. My scanners are picking up luminary royal markers." "Did you rob a palace, Jace?" "I won her," Jace said defensively. "It's a long story." Behind Nova, a massive shape emerged from a side door. It was an alien of a species Arya did not recognize. 4 arms, gray skin like rhinoceros hide, and a face that was mostly tusks. "Core," Jace called out. The giant roared something that sounded like rocks falling down a cliff, then grabbed Jace in a 4-armed bear hug that lifted the human off the ground. "Good to see you too, buddy," Jace wheezed. "Put me down. My ribs are still bruising from yesterday." Core dropped him and turned his small, dark eyes toward Arya. He grunted a question, pointing a thick finger at her. "He asks if this is your mate," Nova translated, leaning against a server bank with a smirk. "He says she is too small for you. She will break." Jace's face turned a brilliant shade of red. "She is not my mate. She is a client, a friend." Arya felt the spike of embarrassment from Jace, hot and prickly, but beneath it, she felt a strange, warm flutter of something else. Something he was trying very hard to suppress. "I am Princess Arya," she said, stepping forward and offering a small bow. "And I am pleased to meet you both." Nova looked her up and down, her cybernetic eye zooming in. A princess. Well, that explains the posture. And the energy bands? "Jace removed them," Arya said. Nova raised an eyebrow at Jace. "You took the leash off a psychic weapon? You really are a soft touch." "Rowan, we need your help." "Nova," Jace cut in, his voice serious. "She has implants. Royal grade. There is data locked inside, and we think it proves Valor is planning a war." Nova's playfulness vanished. She gestured to a medical chair in the center of the room, surrounded by monitors. "Sit," she commanded. "If it's encrypted with luminary royal ciphers, this is going to hurt." Arya sat in the chair. It was cold and smelled of antiseptic. She felt Jace step close to her, his hand resting on her shoulder. His touch was a solid anchor in the swirling anxiety of the room. "I am right here," Jace murmured. Nova connected a thick cable to the data port at the base of Arya's skull, hidden beneath her hair. "Initiating interface," Nova muttered. Arya gasped as ice-cold static flooded her mind. It felt like someone was rifling through her memories with freezing fingers. Images flashed behind her eyes. The palace, Valor's cold face, the auction block. "I'm in," Nova said, her fingers flying across a holographic keyboard. Holy stars. This isn't just data. It's a full archive. Troop movements, supply lines. Here it is. "Operation Eclipse." "Read it," Jace said tightly. Nova's mechanical eye whirred. "It's a false flag operation. Valor has hired the Syndicate to blow up a human colony ship on the border. But the trigger is the princess." "Me?" Arya whispered, her voice trembling. "The report says the disappearance and presumed murder of the princess by human radicals will be the justification for a full-scale invasion." Nova read, "He sold you to get you out of the way so he could claim the humans killed you." Arya felt sick. He didn't just want to get rid of me. He wanted to use my death to kill millions. "There is more," Nova said, her voice dropping lower. She sounded hesitant. "Jace, maybe you should." "Read it," Arya commanded, gripping the armrests. "I need to know everything." Nova sighed. She pulled up a medical log. It was dated 15 years ago. Subject, Aria of House Luminari, age 7. Anomaly detected, high-level empathic potential. Council decision, amplify potential for state security purposes. Nova paused. Go on, Jace said, his voice dangerous. Procedure, optical nerve cauterization. Nova read, her voice devoid of its usual snark. By removing visual input, the brain's neuroplasticity will be forced to overdevelop the empathic centers. The subject's blindness is not a birth defect. It was induced. The silence in the room was absolute. Aria sat frozen. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. For her entire life, she had been told she was born broken. She had been told her blindness was a tragedy, a genetic mistake that made her lesser. She had spent years trying to be worthy, trying to overcome a flaw that she thought was nature's cruelty. But it wasn't nature. It was them. They took my eyes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They burned them out to make me a better radar. Jace let out a sound of pure animal rage. He spun around and punched the metal console next to him. The impact left a dent in the steel and split the skin on his knuckles. That son of a... Jace roared, his voice cracking. He did that to a child, to his own wife. He paced the room, vibrating with a fury so intense that Aria felt it as a scorching heat wave. But then he looked at her. She was not crying. She was shaking. She looked as if she were crumbling from the inside out, her very sense of self dissolving. Jace stopped pacing. The rage vanished, replaced instantly by that deep, ocean-blue compassion. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't ask. He simply pulled her out of the chair and into his arms. He held her tight, one hand pressing her head against his chest, the other wrapping around her back. I got you, he whispered fiercely into her hair. I got you. Aria broke. The sob ripped out of her throat, a raw, ugly sound of grief. She clung to his jacket, burying her face in his shirt. She cried for the little girl who had woken up in the dark. She cried for the years of feeling defective. She cried for the cruelty of a husband who looked at her scars and saw only a useful tool. They did this to me. She sobbed against his chest. I am a monster. I am a lab experiment. No, Jace said, pulling back slightly to cup her face in his hands. He ignored the blood on his knuckles. Listen to me. You are not an experiment. You are the woman who stood up in a room full of sharks and chose kindness. You are the bravest person I have ever met. Aria. They tried to break you to make you a weapon, but you are still a person. You are still whole. Aria sniffled, trembling. I don't feel whole. I feel exposed. She leaned her forehead against his. And I am ashamed, she whispered. Ashamed of what? Jace asked gently. Of this, she said. Of how much I need this. How much I like the way you feel. She raised her head, her blind eyes searching for his. I can feel your anger. Jace. It scares me. But beneath it, I can feel your desire. Jace froze. His hands were still cupping her face. I can feel it spiking when you look at me, Aria whispered. When we were on the floor of the ship. When you touch me now, it is sharp and hot, and it makes me feel wanted. And I am ashamed that I want it, because I am supposed to be a victim right now. Jace swallowed hard. His heart was hammering against her chest. You are not a victim, Aria, he said hoarsely. And, yeah, I want you. I have wanted to kiss you since you told off that warlord. But I can't. Why? She asked. Because I bought you, Jace said, the words bitter. Because on paper, I own you. And you are hurt, and you are vulnerable. And if I touch you now, I am no better than Valor taking what he thinks is his. Arya pulled back. She reached up and placed her hands over his, which were still on her cheeks. You are nothing like him, she said firmly. He took my sight without asking. He took my life without asking. She stepped closer, closing the tiny gap between their bodies. But this choice is mine. She stood on her tiptoes. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, waiting for him to pull away. When he didn't, she pressed her lips to his. It was not a smooth kiss. It was salty with tears and desperate with longing. Arya's lips were soft, trembling against his. Jace made a low sound in his throat. For a second, he stood rigid, fighting himself. But then the dam broke. He groaned and kissed her back, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. One hand tangled in her silver hair, tilting her head back to deepen the kiss. The world narrowed down to the taste of her, the heat of her, the electric hum of her energy pressing against his soul. It was a kiss that tasted of rebellion. It was a reclaiming. For a long moment, they stood there in the center of the cluttered workshop, oblivious to Nova and Kor, who were politely pretending to be very busy with a circuit board in the corner. Then, slowly, Jace pulled back. He was breathless, his eyes dark. He rested his forehead against hers again. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Arya was panting, her lips swollen, a flush high on her cheeks. She started. Yeah. Jace agreed. He took a deep breath and stepped back, his hands lingering on her arms before dropping to his sides. But we stopped there, he said, his voice rough. Not because I don't want to keep going, but because when we really do this, I want you to be free. I want you to be standing on your own 2 feet with no chains, no debts, and no Valor hunting you. I want you to be safe. Arya smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her unseeing eyes. I can wait, she said. Nova cleared her throat loudly from the corner. As touching as this is, and really, it's adorable. I'm recording it for blackmail later. We have a revolution to start. Jace and Arya turned, flushing. Right, Jace said, clearing his throat and straightening his jacket. The data. Nova tapped the screen. We have the proof, but broadcasting it from here won't work. The Luminari deep space firewall will block any transmission from a non-secure sector. If you want the galaxy to see this, you have to upload it from the source. The source? Arya asked. The Royal Palace, Nova said. The central transmission spire in the capital city. We have to go back? Jace asked, his face paling. To the place where everyone is looking for her? It's the only way, Nova said. But you won't go as a princess and a pilot. She hit a button, and a fabricator in the corner whirred to life, spitting out 2 identification chips. Meet Solon Vex, heavy world trader, Nova said, tossing a chip to Jace, and his cultural advisor, Lyra. Arya smiled sadly. That was my maid's name. Kor grunted and tossed a heavy metal device to Jace, disguised transponder. Nova translated, Kor says it will make the Wayfarer read as a cargo hauler on the scanners. It won't hold up to a boarding party, but it will get you through the perimeter. Jace caught the device. This is suicide. It's justice, Arya said quietly. Jace looked at her. The fear was still there in her posture. But the trembling had stopped. She stood straighter. The revelation about her eyes had not broken her. It had hardened her. Okay, Jace said. We go back. We crash the party. They gathered their supplies. Nova gave them a drive containing the decoded data and the virus needed to hijack the spire. As they walked back up the stairs toward the surface, The rain had stopped. The jungle was dripping, steaming in the sudden heat. Arya paused on the ramp of the Wayfarer. She turned back toward the trees, listening to the hum of life one last time. "You okay?" Jace asked, standing beside her. "I was thinking," Arya said. "My tutors taught me that power is control. That to rule, you must be above emotion." She turned to Jace, reaching out to take his hand. Her fingers laced through his, strong and sure. They were wrong. They took my eyes to make me a weapon, but instead, they gave me the ability to see the truth. Love is not a weakness. Jace, kindness is not a weakness. She squeezed his hand. But I am done being a victim. Kindness does not erase what they did to me. It does not grow my eyes back. But it gives me a reason to fight. She walked up the ramp, pulling him with her. I will never be property again. Jace. And Valor is going to learn that the blind see everything. Jace watched her go into the ship. He looked down at his hand, where the warmth of her touch lingered. He looked at the bruised sky of the alien moon. God help them, he muttered to himself. They messed with the wrong princess. He hit the button to close the ramp and followed her into the dark. Luminary Prime was not just a planet. It was a jewel suspended in the velvet-crushing dark of the void. From the cockpit of the Wayfarer, Jace Rowan looked down at the capital world of the Empire he had spent half his life fearing. It was breathtaking. The surface was a seamless tapestry of white and gold, with towers of living crystal piercing the atmosphere like spears of frozen light. Rivers of pure photonic energy wove through the megastructures, pulsing with the heartbeat of a civilization that had mastered the stars while humanity was still burning coal. "It is beautiful," Jace whispered. The transponder code broadcasting their fake identity as a cargo hauler, and it looks like a trap. Arya sat beside him, her hands clenched in her lap. She was wearing a simple gray tunic, her hair dyed a dull brown, and a neural dampener collar around her neck that Nova had jury-rigged to mask her royal biosignature. To the sensors of the orbital defense grid, she was just an assistant. To Jace, she looked smaller, diminished by the disguise. "It does not feel beautiful," Arya said tightly. She pressed her palms against her temples. To her, the planet was not a visual spectacle, it was a deafening scream. Millions of minds, millions of emotional signatures were buzzing below. The sheer density of the population, combined with the high-energy output of the crystal technology, created a psychic pressure that felt like standing next to a jet engine. "It is too loud," she gasped. "I can feel them all. The ambition, the fear, the hunger." "Focus on me," Jace said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Just find my signal." "The blue light, remember?" Arya took a ragged breath, turning her head toward him. She focused on the steady, warm pulse of his presence. It was an anchor in the storm. "I have you," she whispered. "Traffic control to heavy freighter Wayfarer." A cool, synthesized voice crackled over the comms. "You are cleared for docking at Supply Spire 4. Maintain vector. We are in." Jace exhaled. The landing was smooth, a testament to Jace's nerves more than the ship's hydraulics. They touched down in a cavernous docking bay filled with towering crates of exotic fruit and rare minerals. Droids scurried like silver beetles across the floor. Jace grabbed a data pad containing their forged cargo manifest. "Remember, I am Solon Vex, a trader from the Outer Rim. You are Lyra, my cultural advisor. We are here to deliver rare spices for the Ascension Festival." Arya nodded, adjusting the heavy crate of samples Jace handed her to carry. It was part of the disguise. A princess would never carry luggage. "Do you remember the way?" Jace asked quietly as they descended the ramp. "I do not remember the sights," Arya replied softly. But I remember the echoes. She led him away from the main customs checkpoint, slipping behind a stack of shipping containers toward a nondescript maintenance door. She ran her fingers over the metal panel. "This leads to the service tunnels," she whispered. "The servants use them to move unseen between the spires. I used to hide in them when I was a child. The walls still hold the memory of my fear." She shivered but keyed the panel. It slid open. The tunnels were narrow, lit by flickering bioluminescent strips running along the floor. They smelled of ozone and stale, recycled air. Arya moved with surprising confidence here, her hand trailing along the wall. "Left here," she murmured. "The energy feels heavier to the right. That is the barracks. We want the council spire." They moved in silence for 20 minutes, winding deeper into the heart of the city. Jace kept his hand on the blaster concealed in his jacket, his eyes darting to every shadow. He felt like an intruder in a cathedral, a smudge of dirt on a pristine painting. "We are close," Arya said, stopping abruptly. She pointed to a grate in the ceiling. Above them, muffled voices drifted down. The air coming through the grate was cold and smelled of expensive incense. "The High Council chamber," Arya whispered. "They are meeting now." Jace pulled a small device from his pocket, one of Nova's signal boosters. The plan was simple. Plant 3 of these at key data junctions around the spire. When activated, they would hijack the planet's emergency broadcast system and upload the files from Arya's implants directly to every screen in the Empire. "Boost me up," Jace said. He scrambled up the maintenance ladder and carefully pushed the grate aside. He pulled himself up into a darkened alcove behind a heavy tapestry. He reached down and pulled Arya up beside him. They were in a gallery overlooking the council chamber. It was a vast circular room with a floor made of transparent diamond, suspended over a terrifying drop into the city's core. Below them, a dozen figures sat around a floating table. At the head of the table sat Valor. He looked different here. In the auction house, he had been a predator in a suit. Here, in his full ceremonial armor of white and gold, he looked like a god. "The human aggression in Sector 7 has escalated," Valor was saying, his voice smooth and amplified. "We have reports of a strike team targeting the royal transport." "Lies," Jace breathed. Arya closed her eyes, extending her senses. She pushed past the overwhelming noise of the city and focused on the room below. "The one on the left," she whispered. "Counselor Tyron. He is radiating panic. He knows it is a lie." "And the woman next to him?" Jace asked. "Counselor Alara. She feels cold, hard. She is complicit. She is anticipating the war. She desires it." Jace crept along the back of the gallery, placing the first booster behind a statue of a forgotten emperor. He activated it. A tiny green light blinked once, then vanished. "One down," he mouthed. They needed to get to the central data trunk, located in the hallway just outside the chamber. They slipped out of the gallery and into the corridor. It was lined with guards, elite Luminari sentinels in faceless helmets, holding energy pikes. Jace stiffened. "We can't get past them, that we have to," Arya said. She adjusted her collar. "Act like we belong. You are a traitor lost in the wrong corridor. I am your guide." She stepped out from behind the pillar, pulling Jace with her. "Hey," Jace shouted, adopting a rough, annoyed tone. "I was told the delivery entrance was on this level. I've got 50 kilos of spice rotting in the bay." The guards turned, weapons raised. "Halt," the lead guard barked. "This is a restricted zone. I have a permit." Jace waved the datapad aggressively. "Solon Vex. I have a priority clearance signed by the Ministry of Commerce. Check it." The guard hesitated. He stepped forward to scan the pad. Arya focused on the guard. She reached out with her mind, finding the knot of boredom and irritation in his psyche. She pushed at it gently, amplifying his desire to just be done with his shift. Let him pass. She projected the intent, not words, but a feeling. It is just a stupid mistake. Let him pass. The guard blinked. He lowered his weapon slightly. He looked at the pad. The paperwork appears valid, the guard muttered, sounding confused. But you are on the wrong level. The loading docks are 5 levels down. 5 levels? Jace threw his hands up. Typical. Absolute incompetence. Come on, Lyra. He turned, grabbing Arya's arm, and marched her past the guards toward the far end of the hall. As they passed the data trunk, a glowing column of blue light embedded in the wall, Jace stumbled, pretending to drop the data pad. As he bent to retrieve it, he slapped the second booster onto the base of the column. Watch your step, sir, the guard called out lazily. Yeah, Jace grumbled. They turned the corner and collapsed against the wall, out of sight. Jace was sweating. You did that, he whispered. You messed with his head. I just encouraged him to be lazy, Arya said, her breath coming in short gasps. It is harder than it looks. Using the gift like that, it drains me. One more, Jace said. The central control room. Up the ramp. They moved faster now. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a creeping dread. They were deep in enemy territory, and every step felt like walking on a razor's edge. They reached a narrow service corridor that ran parallel to the control room. Footsteps echoed ahead. A patrol. Hide, Jace hissed. He pulled Arya into a shallow alcove, a small recess in the wall used for maintenance drones. It was tiny. Jace pressed his back against the rear wall, and Arya crushed herself against him to stay out of sight. The patrol marched past, their heavy boots clanking on the crystal floor. Jace held his breath. Arya was pressed along the length of his body. He could feel her heart hammering against his chest, a frantic rhythm that matched his own. Her face was inches from his. He could see the flecks of gold in her gray, unseeing eyes. He could smell the scent of the jungle moon still clinging to her hair. The patrol stopped just a few meters away. One of the guards was talking into a comms unit. The fear in the tiny space was palpable. It tasted metallic. If they were found, they were dead. No trial, just execution. Arya looked up at him. She couldn't see his face, but she could feel his terror. And beneath the terror, she felt that spike again, the desire, the desperate biological need to connect, to affirm life in the face of death. Jace, she breathed, the sound barely a ghost of a whisper. He looked down at her. Her lips were parted. If we die, she whispered, I do not want to die hungry. Jace didn't think. He couldn't think. The proximity, the danger, the smell of her, it broke his restraint. He crashed his mouth down on hers. This wasn't the gentle, tentative kiss from the workshop. This was desperate. It was rough. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her harder against him, as if he could merge their bodies into one and hide them both from the world. Arya's hands tangled in his hair, pulling him down. It was a kiss that tasted of fear and finality. It was a silent scream of I am here. I am alive. I am yours. For 10 seconds, the universe existed only in that cramped alcove. The guards, the war, the conspiracy, it all vanished. There was only the heat of her skin and the desperate pressure of her mouth. The footsteps moved away. The patrol continued down the hall. Jace pulled back, gasping for air. His forehead rested against hers. They were both trembling violently. We have to go, he choked out, his voice wrecked. Arya nodded, her hands sliding down his chest. Yes. They slipped out of the alcove, their hands finding each other instantly. The connection between them was no longer just a partnership. It was a live wire. They reached the heavy double doors of the central control chamber. This was it. The final booster needed to be attached to the main transmission console inside. Jace checked the door. It's locked. Nova gave us a bypass, Arya said. She produced a small decoder chip and pressed it to the panel. The light turned green. The doors hissed open. The room beyond was vast, filled with banks of monitors and a massive holographic map of the galaxy. It was silent, empty. Too easy, Jace whispered. They ran toward the central console. Jace pulled out the final booster. Just plug it in, and Nova takes over, Jace said. He reached for the port. I wouldn't do that. A voice echoed from the shadows. Jace froze. Arya stiffened, her breath hitching. The shadows at the far end of the room dissolved. Commander Valor stepped forward, flanked by 6 elite Praetorian guards. Their weapons were leveled at Jace's chest. Valor was smiling. It was a terrible, satisfied smile. I felt you, my dear, Valor said, looking only at Arya. The moment your foot touched the soil of this world. Did you really think a dampener collar could hide a signal as unique as yours? I know the frequency of your soul. Arya, I helped design the trauma that shaped it. Arya stepped back, gripping Jace's arm. You knew we were coming. I counted on it, Valor said. He walked closer, his boots clicking on the floor. I knew you would run to the humans. I knew you would find a bleeding heart to save you. It fits the narrative perfectly. The tragic princess, seduced and corrupted by a human radical, returning to assassinate her husband. He looked at Jace with sneering disgust. And you, the pilot, you let yourself be sold. Arya, to this? A scavenger? A thief? He did not buy me, Arya shouted, her voice ringing in the chamber. He freed me. Valor laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Freedom is an illusion. Child, there is only ownership. Guards, Valor commanded. Secure them. Jace stepped in front of Arya, shielding her. He raised his hands. Wait, Jace yelled. Let her go. Valor paused, raising an eyebrow. I'm the one you want, Jace said fast, desperation making his voice crack. I kidnapped her. I forced her to come back. She's innocent. Take me. Execute me. Just let her walk away. Arya grabbed Jace's jacket. No, Jace, no! Valor looked at Jace, then at Arya. He saw the way she clung to him. He saw the way Jace stood, ready to die for her. How touching. Valor sneered. But useless. I don't need a hostage. Human. I need a tragedy. And 2 dead traitors are much more tragic than one. Kill him, Valor ordered. Jace shoved Arya behind a console and drew his blaster. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 guards went down, their armor smoking, but there were too many. A heavy energy bolt slammed into Jace's chest. Jace! Arya screamed. He flew backward, crashing into the main console. The impact shattered the screen. The signal booster in his hand went flying, skidding across the floor and sparking as it broke apart. No! Jace groaned, trying to rise, but a guard stepped on his chest, pinning him down. Arya tried to run to him, but Valor caught her. He grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off her feet. Look at him, Valor hissed, forcing her head toward Jace. Look at your savior. He is nothing. Arya clawed at Valor's hand, gagging. She couldn't see Jace, but she could feel his pain. It was a jagged red agony that tore through her mind. Take them to the tribunal, Valor commanded, throwing Arya to the floor. The cameras are ready. It is time to show the Empire their fallen princess. The tribunal chamber was a coliseum of judgment. Thousands of spectators filled the tiered seats, and millions more watched via the hovering drone cams. Jace and Arya were dragged into the center of the arena. They were shackled again, heavy. Iron cuffs this time, not elegant energy bands. Jace was bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, limping heavily. Arya was bruised, her disguise torn. Valor stood on a raised podium. His image projected 10 stories high above them, citizens of Luminari. Valor's voice boomed, "We stand on the precipice of war." The crowd roared, a sound like crashing waves. "Behold!" Valor pointed a dramatic finger at the pair in the pit. "Your princess, stolen from us, and now returned, not as a victim, but as a traitor." Arya raised her head. She couldn't see the crowd, but she could feel them. It was terrifying. The emotion in the room was a physical weight, confusion, betrayal, anger. Valor had spun his web well. They didn't see a woman fighting for her life. They saw a princess standing next to a human criminal. They felt the shame of it. "This human," Valor shouted, "corrupted her mind. He turned her against her own blood. He brought her here to sabotage our defenses. Traitor!" Someone screamed from the stands, "Human filth!" Another yelled. A rock hit Jace in the head, cutting his forehead. He didn't flinch. He just looked at Arya. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crowd. "I'm so sorry, Arya. I failed you." Arya looked at him. She felt the crowd's hatred washing over her, trying to drown her. But then she felt Jace, even now bleeding and defeated. His concern was for her. His blue flame was flickering, but it was still warm. She leaned her forehead against his, ignoring the chains. "You did not fail," she whispered fiercely. "We lost," Jace choked out. "The booster is broken and the truth is gone." "No," Arya said. She closed her blind eyes and took a deep breath, pulling the chaotic energy of the room into her lungs. "Kindness is not a tactic. Jace, it does not fail just because we are beaten. It is the reason I am standing. It is the reason I am not broken." She lifted her chin, turning to face the screaming crowd she could not see. "They think I am weak," she said to Jace. "They think I am a broken thing that was sold. But they forgot one thing." "What?" Jace asked, looking at her with wonder. "They forgot that I can hear them," Arya said, "and if I can hear them, I can speak to them, not with words, but with the truth." She squeezed his hand. "We are not done. Jace Rowan, Valor wants a show. Let's give him one." The guards moved in to drag them to the holding cells beneath the arena, awaiting the final judgment. As the heavy doors slammed shut, plunging them into darkness, Arya did not cower. She sat in the dark, and she began to hum, a low, resonant sound that matched the frequency of the crystal walls. "What are you doing?" Jace asked, slumping against the wall. "I am tuning the instrument," Arya whispered. "What instrument?" "The city," she said. "The crystals. They respond to emotion. Valor built this city to amplify his power. But he forgot that I was born to amplify the truth." She turned to Jace in the dark. "Rest now, my gentle heart. Because when the sun rises, when we are going to scream." The grand amphitheater of Luminari Prime was a bowl of white stone carved into the planet's crust, vast enough to hold 100,000 citizens. On this day, every seat was filled. Above the crowd, massive holographic emitters projected the proceedings to the farthest reaches of the Empire, turning the trial into a spectacle of galactic proportions. In the center of the arena, kneeling on a platform of black obsidian, were Princess Arya and Jace Rowan. They were surrounded by a ring of Praetorian guards, their energy pikes humming with lethal potential. Jace was pale, his shoulder bandaged but bleeding through the fabric, his breathing shallow. Arya knelt beside him, her head bowed, her hands shackled behind her back. high above them on the rostrum. Commander Valor stood like a statue of righteous judgment. His voice, amplified by the arena's acoustics, rolled over the crowd like thunder. "Citizens," Valor intoned, gesturing to the immense screens floating in the air. "We do not seek vengeance. We seek truth. And the truth is painful." The screens flickered to life. Footage from the auction played, grainy, edited, and devoid of context. It showed Arya standing on the platform. It showed her raising her hand. It showed her pointing at Jace. "See how she chooses him," Valor narrated, his voice dripping with sorrow. "See how she rejects the offers of our noble allies. She was not coerced. She was not forced. She chose the human. She chose to abandon her duty, her bloodline, and her people for the sake of a primitive infatuation." The crowd murmured. Arya could feel their emotions shifting. The confusion was hardening into disgust. Valor was masterfully painting her as a traitorous harlot and Jace as a seducer. "And now," Valor continued, his voice rising, "we learn that this human brought her back not to repent, but to sabotage our defenses, to open the gates to a human invasion fleet gathering on our borders." "Lies!" Jace shouted, straining against his chains. "Silence the prisoner," Valor commanded. A guard struck Jace across the face with the butt of his pike. Jace collapsed, coughing blood. Arya flinched, feeling the blow as a spike of white-hot pain in her own mind. She lifted her head. She could feel the crowd's anger boiling over. They were ready to demand blood. Valor was seconds away from declaring war. "Therefore," Valor announced, raising his hands, "to protect our sovereignty, I ask the Council to authorize a preemptive strike against the human coalition. We must purge this threat before it consumes us." The crowd roared in approval. Arya took a deep breath. She closed her eyes, useless as they were, and reached into the deepest, most guarded part of her memory. It was a failsafe, a protocol taught to her by her father before he died, a command code embedded in the very architecture of the city. "Override Alpha 1-0, Arya whispered, voice of the blood. Silence. It was not a shout. It was a command spoken with the precise tonal frequency required by the central computer. The effect was instantaneous. The massive holographic screens flickered and went black. The amplified roar of the crowd was cut off as the audio dampeners slammed into maximum density. The lights in the amphitheater died, plunging 100,000 people into twilight. Then, a single spotlight snapped on. It did not shine on Valor. It shone on Arya. Her voice, now linked directly to the city's broadcast system, boomed from every speaker, clear and terrified and defiant. I was not seduced. The crowd gasped. The silence was absolute. Valor slammed his hand on his console. Cut her feed. Kill the audio. The technicians scrambled, but the system was locked. Royal override. I was sold, Arya cried out, standing up. She swayed, weak from the shackles, but she stood tall. Look at me. Citizens of Luminari, look at your princess. You saw the footage? Then listen to the truth of what you saw. She turned her face toward the camera drone hovering nearby. I stood in a room of monsters, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I stood in the dark, and I felt them. I felt the greed of the warlords who wanted to strap me to their ships as a weapon. I felt the lust of the geneticists who wanted to harvest my blood. I felt the cold, calculating hunger of the man who put me there. My husband, Commander Valor. She pointed a shackled hand toward the rostrum. He stood there and watched as they bid on me like cattle. He did not sell me to save the Empire. He sold me to pay his debts. Lies! Valor screamed, his composure cracking. Guards! Execute her! But the guards hesitated. The accusation was too enormous, the voice too commanding. And in that room of darkness, Arya continued, her voice softening, breaking with raw honesty. There was only one light, one person who did not look at me and see a thing, one person who felt kind. She looked down at Jace, who was staring up at her with awe. "I did not choose a master," Arya said, tears slipping from under her blindfold. "I chose the only human being in the room. I chose the one whose heart was not a weapon. I chose him because when he looked at me, I did not feel fear. I felt safe." Suddenly, the giant screens flared to life again, but it was not Valor's footage. Static hissed, and then a new image appeared. It was a medical log. Complex, undeniable data scrolled across the screens. "Nova," Jace whispered, grinning through his bloody teeth. Arya's voiceover continued, narrating the data as it appeared. "You see the dates? You see the signatures? Valor authorized the surgery. He ordered the doctors to burn the optic nerves of a 7-year-old child." Gasps of horror rippled through the stadium. The Luminari revered genetic purity. The deliberate mutilation of a royal child was a sacrilege beyond words. "He took my eyes," Arya shouted, her voice echoing with the pain of a lifetime. "He blinded me to make me a better tool for his war, and now he wants to use my death to start another one." The screens shifted again. This time, it was the strategic map of the false flag operation. The communications between Valor and the Syndicate, the payment transfers, the order to assassinate the princess. The crowd was no longer roaring, and they were screaming, but not at Arya. They were turning toward the rostrum. Valor looked at the screens, his face draining of color. He realized the game was over. The narrative had shattered. "Kill them!" Valor shrieked, drawing his own ceremonial sword. "Kill them all!" The Praetorian guards closest to Valor, his personal elite, obeyed. They activated their pikes and charged down the stairs toward the obsidian platform. But the regular city guards, the ones who had grown up revering the royal family, stood frozen. "Defend the princess," a captain shouted. Chaos erupted. The amphitheater turned into a war zone. Loyalists clashed with Valor's mercenaries. Energy blasts scorched the air. The crowd panicked, rushing for the exits. In the center of the storm, Jace struggled to his feet. He saw 3 of Valor's elite guards breaking through the defensive line, heading straight for Arya. "Arya!" Jace yelled. He threw himself in front of her just as a guard fired a high-impact plasma bolt. The blast hit Jace in the chest. It was not a glancing blow. It was a direct hit. The impact lifted him off his feet and threw him backward. He slammed into Arya, knocking her to the ground. "Jace!" Arya screamed, scrambling to her knees. He was lying on his back, his chest a ruin of scorched fabric and blood. His breathing was a wet, rattling sound. "Jace, please, no!" Arya sobbed, her hands hovering over his wound, terrified to touch it. Jace blinked, his eyes unfocused. He reached up, his hand trembling, and touched her cheek. "Hey," he rasped. "You stupid, stubborn human," Arya cried, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you do that? Had to—" "Protect the asset," Jace whispered, a faint smile touching his lips. "Don't you dare joke," Arya sobbed. "I'm glad," Jace said, his voice fading. "I'm glad you can see me. Arya, even if I never really saw myself." His hand slipped from her cheek. His eyes drifted shut. "No!" Arya screamed. The sound tore out of her throat, a psychic shockwave that actually rattled the teeth of the guard standing 10 meters away. Panic threatened to consume her. He was dying. The only light she had ever known was flickering out. "Focus." A voice in her head whispered, "You are not a victim. You are a weapon. Use it." Arya stopped crying. She took a deep breath. inhaling the chaos of the battlefield. She didn't open her eyes. She didn't need them. She expanded her mind. She pushed her perception outward, past Jace, past the platform, into the swirling melee of the amphitheater. She saw it all, not in light and shadow, but in vectors of intent. She felt the aggression of Valor's guards as jagged red spikes. She felt the fear and resolve of the loyalists as blue waves. She saw the trajectory of every energy bolt before it was fired, telegraphing the shooter's murderous intent. She stood up. Her shackles had been broken by a stray blast. She stood over Jace's body like an avenging angel. "Captain!" Arya shouted, pointing to her left without looking. "3 hostiles flanking at 4 o'clock. Duck!" The loyalist captain, instinctively obeying the voice of command, dropped to one knee. A plasma bolt sailed over his head, missing him by inches. He fired back, taking out the attacker. "Shield wall! Front!" Arya commanded, spinning to face the ramp. "Grenade!" 5 guards raised their energy shields instantly. An explosion blossomed against the blue fields, harmlessly deflecting away. The soldiers on the floor realized what was happening. She was not just watching. She was orchestrating. "Eyes on the princess!" the captain roared. "Follow her commands!" Arya became the conductor of the battle. She stood amidst the smoke and fire, her blindfold torn away, her unseeing eyes glowing with a faint, eerie luminescence as her brain processed the massive intake of data. "Left flank, push!" she ordered. "Sniper in the royal box, elevate fire." Valor, watching his forces crumble under the impossible precision of the counterattack, lost his mind. He saw his power evaporating. He saw the broken girl dismantling his empire. "No!" Valor screamed. He leaped from the rostrum, activating his gravity boots. He soared through the air, landing on the obsidian platform with a heavy crash, sword in hand. He was 10 meters from Arya. "You belong to me!" Valor roared, charging at her. Guards turned to fire, but Valor was too fast, deflecting the shots with his energy blade. He closed the distance. Arya did not move. She did not flinch. She stood her ground, sensing him. She felt his trajectory. She felt the exact moment his foot would plant for the strike. "Now!" Arya shouted. She didn't order the guards to shoot Valor. She ordered them to shoot the floor. 3 guards fired at the obsidian tiles directly in front of Valor's path. The stone exploded, creating a crater. Valor, committed to his charge, stumbled. His foot caught the edge of the crater. He pitched forward, his momentum betraying him. He crashed onto the ground at Arya's feet, his sword skittering away. Before he could rise, Arya stepped forward. She placed her bare foot on his chest. It was not a heavy weight, but the authority in the gesture was crushing. "You sold your wife," Arya said, her voice low and cold, amplified by the silence of the stunned arena. "You sold your honor, and you sold your people." Valor looked up at her, gasping, dirt on his face. He looked at her eyes, those clouded silver eyes, and for the first time, he saw the steel behind them. "I made you," Valor hissed. "No," Arya said. "You broke me, and I put myself back together." She raised her hand. The loyalist guards rushed forward, weapons leveled at Valor's head. "Kill him!" a voice from the crowd shouted. "Justice!" another screamed. Arya looked out at the invisible audience. She felt their bloodlust. It would be so easy. It would be so satisfying to end him. But then she felt Jace's faint, struggling heartbeat behind her. Pure kindness. "Arrest him," Arya commanded. The guards hesitated. "Arrest him," she shouted. "We are not him. We do not kill for convenience. He will stand trial. He will answer to the people he tried to deceive. That is true power." The guards hauled Valor to his feet and dragged him away, screaming threats that no one listened to anymore. Arya turned back to Jace. She fell to her knees, her hands pressing over his wound, feeling the warm, sticky blood. "Medic!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "Save him, please, save him!" The infirmary was quiet. The walls were soft white, glowing with ambient healing light. The air smelled of sterile ozone and rapid knit gel. Jace drifted in and out of the dark. He felt heavy. He felt pain. But mostly, he felt a hand holding his. He forced his eyes open. The light hurt. He blinked, focusing on the figure sitting beside his bio-bed. She was wearing a clean white tunic. Her hair was washed, shining like spun silver. She was not wearing a blindfold. Her eyes, milky and strange, were fixed on his face. "You are staring," Jace rasped, his voice sounding like gravel. "I am watching you," Arya said softly. She squeezed his hand. "You have been asleep for 3 days. The doctor said..." "They said it was very close." Jace tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his chest stopped him. He groaned. "Don't move," Arya scolded gently. "They reconstructed your lung. You need to heal." "Did we win?" Jace asked. Arya smiled. "Valor is in a containment cell. The council has been dissolved pending a full investigation. The war is cancelled. Nova is currently rewriting the Imperial encryption protocols. And Kor is... well, Kor is eating everything in the palace kitchen. So, we won." Jace sighed, relaxing into the pillow. "Good. That means I don't have to pay that debt to the loan shark." Arya laughed. It was a free, light sound that made Jace's heart ache. "I paid your debt, Jace, and I bought your sister a new pair of lungs. She is being transferred to a private clinic on the moon. She will breathe real air in a week." Jace stared at her. Tears pricked his eyes. He didn't know what to say. "Why?" he whispered. "Because," Arya said, leaning closer. "The blind alien princess was sold by her husband. She was alone in the dark. But a human, a stubborn, foolish, wonderful human, won her." She reached out and traced the line of his jaw, just as she had done on the ship. "You won me. Jace Rowan. Not with money, not with power. You won me with pure kindness." She leaned down. Jace met her halfway. The kiss was slow. It wasn't desperate like the one in the tunnel. It wasn't terrified. It was assured. It was a promise kept. It tasted of life and second chances. When they pulled apart, Arya rested her forehead against his. "I am not going to be queen," she whispered. "No?" Jace asked. "No. I cannot sit on a throne and rule. I want to be an ambassador. I want to travel between your people and mine. I want to write laws that say no one can ever be sold again. I want to make sure that consent is the first law of the stars." "Sounds like a lot of work," Jace murmured. "You're going to need a pilot." Arya smiled. "I have a pilot. Although, his ship is a piece of junk." "Hey," Jace protested weakly. "The Wayfarer has characters and we will refit it," Arya decided. "Royal budget? Gold plating? Don't you dare." Jace laughed, wincing. 6 months later. The Wayfarer looked different. The hull was patched with new, high-grade alloy. The engines hummed with a smooth, efficient purr that made the floor plates vibrate pleasantly. They were drifting in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant, watching the auroras dance. Or rather, Jace was watching them. Arya was lying on the couch in the expanded living quarters, her head resting on Jace's chest. His arm was draped around her. "Describe it to me," she said. "It's purple," Jace said, struggling as always. "And green. Swirly." "You are terrible at this," Arya teased, poking him in the ribs. "I'm trying." Jace laughed. "It looks like..." "Giant ribbons, like neon ribbons in the wind." Arya closed her eyes. She felt the ship around her. She felt the vast, cold emptiness of space outside, but mostly she felt the man beneath her. She felt the steady thump of his heart. She felt the warmth of his skin. She felt his love for her, a constant golden light that never wavered, never spiked with greed, never cooled with indifference. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "You can't even see it," Jace said, kissing the top of her head. "I see it better than you do," Arya replied. She shifted, snuggling closer. She thought about the dark room in the station. She thought about the chains. She thought about the moment she had pointed at him, a gamble on a feeling she couldn't name. She had lost her eyes to cruelty, but she had gained a vision that no one else possessed. She saw the truth of people. She saw that power was brittle, but kindness was iron. It was the only thing that could survive the vacuum of space. "Where to next?" "Ambassador?" Jace asked. "Anywhere," Arya said. "Just keep flying." Jace grinned. "You got it, princess." He reached for the controls, and the Wayfarer banked smoothly away from the planet, leaping into the star-filled void, carrying two souls who had found their way home in the dark. The holographic billboard hovering over the grime-streaked canopy of the salvage yard